What's up, everybody? Welcome in. It's that time of week. It is the Sooners on SI Podcast, episode 267, otherwise known as Alabama Week. The Crimson Tide are coming. I know, despite what you would believe from a press conference or any of the content you see from anybody, Alabama will play Oklahoma this week, a game of consequence for your basically anyone that's more than 5 years old. Unfortunately, the newborns right now don't understand what this game means, but elsewhere, it should be a ton of fun. We're going to dive in. I'm Brent Chapman here, as always, hanging out in Moore, up in the 918, joined by our fearless leader, the great John Hoover. Boss man, how you doing on this Alabama week?
We're fired up. What more do you want? Oklahoma versus Alabama. I mean, you're talking about two of the most storied programs in college football. A lot of people will say, a lot of people, not necessarily me, but a lot of people will say, top two programs in college football history, Alabama, Oklahoma. And of course, Alabama has separated itself in recent years, there's no doubt. But even 20 years ago, OU Alabama was a showdown, was a showcase of college football excellence for generations and decades and decades. And here we are, man. OU has joined the SEC. There's 2 games left, and Alabama Crimson Tide is coming to town. I, for one, am fired up. I know it's going to be an interesting game for some, not necessarily interesting probably for many, but I'm fired up, man. I'm excited to cover Alabama in Norman. That's as good as it gets.
It's only happened once ever, right? This is the
Yep.
seventh ever meeting between the Sooners and the Crimson Tide. Only twice before this Saturday have these two teams played on a college campus. When you go through it, the home and home, obviously, very, very early on in the Stoops era, you had, what was it, the Birmingham Bowl? That gets us to 3. That was was that in the 60s? Maybe it was the 80s. I'll have to look at that. Then you have basically a Sugar Bowl meeting. You've got a meeting out there on South Beach in 2018, Kyler and crew. This does not come to a college football campus very often, and it's pretty. I'm jazzed up about it regardless. And these next 2 weeks, I'm juiced, man. It's what, 6:30 under the lights on Saturday night. It's going to be a night game next week in Baton Rouge. The Alabama at LSU back to back. I know a lot of people, when the schedule came out, you're going, what is happening? That's why you joined the SEC. You look ahead to next year's home slate, Michigan, and then you're going to have Ole Miss come in, which will be fun, but you're going to have LSU and Norman, all that. Like, that's why you joined the SEC, even though the team this year for Oklahoma, not great. And who that kind of spilled over into the Brent Venables press conference on Tuesday.
Yep.
We were both in Norman yesterday, and I think we kind of segment this bad boy into 3 different silos, and there's a couple of questions that kind of bob and weave in between. There's the present, there's the current, there's Oklahoma, Alabama, and some senior day, senior night stuff. We'll hit that last. There's the future and a little bit of the past shaded by the future. There's the offensive coordinator search. Obviously, in the past, Oklahoma made a bad offensive coordinator hire on the search for that. And then what the recruits will mean, all that. So let's start at the top. Let's start with the offensive coordinator stuff. That's what Eric Bailey led with when it kind of got tossed over to him as far as an update on the search. Here's the too long didn't read of what Brent Venables said. Search is ongoing. This is going to shock everybody. Buckle up. If Brent Venables gets the kind of guy he wants, a man of high integrity, all that stuff, then they're playing football right now and probably not going to want to make an offensive coordinator search with 2 weeks left. Their center of orbit, all that stuff. So the search is zipping along. Brent Venables is pleased with it, all that stuff, but don't expect an announcement or anything like that before the season's over, because they're looking at guys, obviously, who are coaching football right now. And then the fun addendum brought to you, Dean Blevins just asked directly, the
Well,
name that is not currently coaching right now, Dan Mullen, been flying around, all that stuff, former Mississippi State, former Florida head coach. Is it his job to turn down, I believe was the phrasing that Dino used. And Brent Venables basically said, let's see if I can get this right. I'm not going to comment on the details of an ongoing search. I did reach out to Dan Mullen last year, though. So That was I don't know if I got it exactly, but I got pretty darn close with what Brent Venables said. What'd you make of all the OC talk?
It was a little surprising. I love Dean's question, straight to the point. Don't screw around. Forget the kid gloves. Have you offered the job to Dan Mullen, and is it his to accept? Dang, I love that. That's good stuff. Of course, Brent's not going to answer it directly, not when he's just beginning the negotiations timeline. And the way we understand it is he's not negotiating with Dan Mullen or Jake Spavital or anybody like that. OU's people are negotiating with the representatives of these other people, right? Of these other candidates. That's kind of how it's shaken out. He said in terms of the timeline, he used the word sooner rather than later. There's some urgency to get it done, but they're not in a hurry to get it done, right? So they're going to take their time. They're going to do the due diligence. They're going to look into everybody's background checks and all that stuff. They're going to look into, accomplishments on the field and how they interacted with their players, who they've coached with, their coaching history. And there's some interesting candidates, obviously, that have some good history that I think Brent Venables would be interested in. Spavital would be one. Mullen, I think there's a split in the fan base on this one. Half of them are saying, "Hell yeah, get him in. Let's have an offensive coordinator for a year so he can go be a head coach somewhere." The other half are saying, "Can we get somebody a little less smarmy? Can we get somebody a little more with a little more integrity? Someone who's been coaching maybe in the past 4 years, which he hasn't, right?" Yeah, and you can feel however you want to about Dan Mullen. I'm not sitting here casting aspersions or making suggestions. I'm just saying people feel the way they feel about it, and that's fine. But December 2nd seems like the ideal kind of target date. Why, Ryan? Because December 3rd starts National Signing Day, early signing period. And so as there are recruits out there right now, some have the designation of 5 stars who are looking at other schools, considering other schools, flirting with other schools, visiting other schools, whatever you want to say. OU needs to have somebody in place so they can show them empirical evidence and proof and contracts and whatever else you have that this is going to be your offensive coordinator when you come to play football at Oklahoma. December 3rd is like the drop dead date for me, because if December 4th and 5th happens and you still don't have an offensive coordinator, you could be opening yourself up for trouble.
Yeah, I think the 3 key dates are pretty clear. The first one is November 30th.
Yep.
That's Oklahoma's last game. That's the date of the LSU game. That's also when a lot of the coaches across the country will immediately turn the calendar, because after that, you're only going to have conference championships and then the 12 teams that eventually play the college football playoff. So that's like the earliest, unless it was like a Dan Mullen who's not coaching right now. Right. Then, yeah, the other ones are, like you mentioned, December 4th, that Wednesday, immediately following the LSU game. That's when the early signing period opens, which is effectively now National Signing Day. Then the last key date is December 9th, which is the following Monday, the Monday after the SEC championship game, all that stuff. Why does that matter, Ryan? Well, that's when the transfer portal window officially opens up shop. And so certainly by December 5th, Oklahoma needs to have this thing wrapped up, announced. It doesn't need to be a pick up the phone and call Michael Fasusi and say, Ben Arbuckle's going to be your OC, but don't worry, it needs to be announced, bells, whistles, all that fun stuff, so that those guys can officially get on the phone and say, "Hello, my name is Joe Craddock. I am your new offensive coordinator. Let's get after it." Let all this stuff. That's what needs to happen there. So we'll see that. John, we published our Hot Board 2.0 earlier this week. A lot of the names that we're talking about: Dan Mullen, Ben Arbuckle, who's at Washington State, if you're not familiar, Jake Spavital, who's turned Baylor's offense around, Craddock at Tulane. There's also Mike Shanahan of Indiana. There was some other, I believe it was Pete Nakos who threw it out there before we were firing up today of On Three, that some other names are still on the periphery as far as, what's the guy at Pittsburgh? Bell. Is it Cade Bell at Pitt? And then my guy, Buster Faulkner at Georgia Tech, was a name that was brought up, was mentioned. Please stay away. He's doing such a good job. But John, if you're taking the step back, let's just do a quick pros, cons, all that stuff. And then at the end, you're going to hire an offensive coordinator and we're going to hold you to it. We can start with Mullen, like we talked about. pro, 17 years of SEC coaching experience, right? He is the guy. I know we probably forgot about this because he's been his own man for so long, but learned under Urban Meyer, helped develop Alex Smith, Tim Tebow, then moved over to Mississippi State, Dak Prescott. The fun trivia question, my favorite college football trivia question: those Mississippi State Bulldogs were your first ever number one team in the college football playoff rankings. Also got Kyle Trask, an NFL shot at Florida. Even his last season at Florida, John, when he went 5-6, his offense was top 40 offense in basically every metric, every category, essentially, stuff like that. The con on that is, like you mentioned earlier, he's been out of the game for a little bit. He's been basically on a desk for 3 or 4 years. Some of the other ones, Ben Arbuckle at Washington State, the pro, really explosive high flying offense at Western Kentucky. He immediately went to Washington State and took an offense that was in the hundreds in total offense with Cam Ward. Yes, that Cam Ward got them up, jumped up, rock and roll. This year he loses Cam Ward. He has Sean Mateer. The offense is even better metric wise. He's also playing schools of blind and deaf on the schedule that Washington State had to put together. That's the pros. The con, and he's 29 or was 29 when he was hired. The con of Arbuckle would be next year will be his fourth ever year as a play caller. He studied at Houston Baptist for 2 years under Zach Kitley, the current Texas Tech OC, then took a year at Seminole High School in Texas before going back to be a analyst essentially at Western Kentucky under Kitley. Kitley left for Tech. He became the OC. So he's had 3 years of play calling experience, which I think is an absolute crazy thing to put out there for Brent Venables, knowing this will be the future of his job will depend on if this hire is good or not. That's kind of the con there. You got Spavital, right? Another con of Arbuckle is he's not worked in the SEC. Spavital has worked in the SEC, both at Texas A&M. I believe he had a stop at Arkansas, had the Texas State head coach spot, but Spavital worked under Sonny Dykes at Cal. He's turned Baylor's offense around immediately. Craddock at Tulane. He worked as an assistant, an analyst at Clemson before making his way around. He's been with Summerall for a couple of stops now from Troy to Tulane. He's done a really nice job there. He's got SEC experience. The con on Craddock, I guess, is that he hasn't proven as an OC at a big time spot like a Florida or Mississippi State like Dan Mullen has. And then Mike Shanahan at Indiana. Obviously, everything Indiana's doing, the con of that is we don't know how much that is Cignetti versus Shanahan. That's always a risk. And a con of Shanahan that Arbuckle, Spavital, and Craddock have is you don't imagine that he's bringing a quarterback with him. If Arbuckle, Spavital, Craddock all came over, there's at least that opportunity to bring existing quarterbacks if that's something they're interested in doing. I know that was a bunch of word salad, but what kind of sticks out to you as far as the things that say if John Hoover's making this hire and everything else is to the side, this is who I'm getting because of this.
Yeah, I'm thankful I'm not making this hire, although I would like the opportunity to make $8 million a year so I could make this hire. That'd be cool. I'd take that. First of all, go to Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com and check out Ryan's hot board. In addition to the rundown he just gave you verbally, he's got a lot more details in that story. It's right there on the right side of the screen under the latest news. You'll see it, OC Hot Board 2.0. Y'all need to dig into that because I think the next OC is going to come from this group that he's highlighted here. Now, listen, I'm kind of simple. Okay. I'm a very simple person. I like simple things. I like familiarity. And in terms of if it were my team, I would have a familiarity with Jake Spavital. Tulsa kid, we've talked about it. Bill Blankenship in his immediate DNA. He's also coached for Kevin Sumlin. He's also coached for Dana Holgerson. He's also coached for Gus Malzahn and Todd Graham, Mike Norvell. He's coached for Sonny Dykes. He's coached with Cliff Kingsbury, Dave Aranda. All those coaches are names that we're all familiar with, and the success that they've had, we're all familiar with, right? I don't count very many championships in that group, right? I mean, you see a bunch of offense, you see a bunch of numbers, you see a bunch of guys who move the football up and down, and that's what Oklahoma needs. But I don't see a championship DNA coming from anybody. Now, having said all that, I mean, you can say, hey, let's take a look at, say, for instance, the I don't know, Nick Saban tree. Nick Saban's got more championship DNA than anybody. how has his assistant coaches done historically? There's been some good ones. There's been some others that are just like, what is he doing here? Bob Stoops has a coaching tree that, you look at it initially and you're like, that's a heck of a bunch of coaches. How many championships came out of those guys? Not very many. So it's a tough. You got to, I think, grade each guy on his own merits. But coming from that tree, Spavital with again Sumlin, Holgerson, Norvell, Dykes, Kingsbury. He's got a couple of defensive guys in there, and Graham and Aranda, another offensive whiz, and Malzahn. He absolutely merits looking at. Also, he worked with Johnny Manziel his junior year, so the year after he won the, I guess that would be his second sophomore year after he won the Heisman. He also worked with a couple of guys by the name of Kyle Allen at Texas A&M and Kyler Murray at Texas A&M. So I don't know if that's a strike for or against, because Kyler wasn't very good at A&M. He needed some coaching when he got out of College Station, and he got some when he got to Norman. So again, there's a little bit of a word salad for you. That's a lot to consider. I don't know. Like I said, kind of glad I'm not making this decision. Although this is why they pay Brent Venables the big bucks. It's going to be interesting to see the interaction and the way we're not going to get to see it, of course, but we can imagine the interaction between OU's research team and the people who are putting together the compensation package, the administration, basically Joe Castiglione's team, and how Brent Venables, vets his own offensive coordinator the next time. Because guys, we've talked about it a million times. This is a huge, huge hire for Brent Venables.
Yeah, it's interesting because the guy that I would choose, I don't know if he's wanting an offensive coordinator job. I'd go with Mullen. I've always been in the kind of the modern era of college football, when you have so much limitation on what you can do practice wise, thing like that. I would like to see a team get away from the air raid, get away from the veer and shoot. And I know it's not like a pro offense or anything, but the power spread, the Urban Meyer, a lot of reading and things with the quarterback, it just makes it easier in the spring period for your defense and offense to both be more physical, because they're doing things that work with each other, building that physicality. And you talk about the 17 years of experience in the SEC. Even if Dan Mullen would only be a Norman for a year or two and then he's hot shotting out to his next head coaching job, I think that would be valuable. This is the height, weight, speed. These are the measurables that you have to have at this position and this position and this position in the SEC. Because right now, Dan Mullen would walk in and have more SEC coaching experience, I believe, than all of Oklahoma's on-field coaches combined, just as far as specific SEC experience. Also, if you look at what Mullen did at Florida, his first 2 years, he had Felipe Franks, and while Felipe Franks on paper didn't get like way more efficient as far as completion percentage, his pick numbers dropped, so he took care of the football. They're a really potent rushing attack with Michael Pirine, Samaje's cousin, right? And then you flip the switch and the rushing goes way down. Why? Because he was airing it out and spreading it all over the field and running just as much four wide and all that stuff with Kyle Trask. And they made it to an SEC championship game in 2020. I know that Oklahoma fans don't have a good memory of that version of Dan Mullen because they had basically tapped out on the season.
Mm-hmm.
I remember sitting in that press conference with you on Zoom ahead of the Cotton Bowl, counting how many times have they practiced since the SEC championship game. They've not used their 15 practices, all that stuff. But if Mullen's not a guy that would want that, I would be very comfortable with the Jake Spavital. I've come around on Craddock a little bit. My big knock on Craddock is that he's never been a guy that's had like a top five off, like one of those, like it's the elite of the elite, boom, boom, boom. But if you can bring Darian Mensah, I think that's as comfortable as it gets for Oklahoma, which is kind of a weird thing to like openly talk about. That's the thing I've still not quite adjusted to, I think, in modern college football, Hoover, just being like, yeah, we're going to tamper for you, I guess. We're just going to like openly tamper all that stuff. But it'll be interesting. And all of that's got to matter. It's got to go quickly because this recruiting class is huge. Obviously, the reports have emerged that Michael Fasusi taking that Texas visit. Michael Fasusi, the 5-star crown jewel prize offensive tackle of this recruiting class. You also want to keep Ryan Boje, another big-time offensive tackle in this recruiting class, who a couple of recruiting questions were asked. For the second time, Brent was asked kind of about the message to offensive recruits while this OC search is going on. he said a lot of what he said the first time, which is look at the history of this place. We're not still going to run the triple option. Oklahoma quarterbacks, yes. Skill position, yes. Bill Bedenbaugh puts guys to the pros. And he started with, if you look at our offensive line, Bill Bedenbaugh, no one does it better as far as developing and all that stuff. I think that was as clear as you needed to be as far as who exactly he was speaking to. But we did get important clarification in kind of your exchange with Brent Venables. I guess I say exchange. Everyone thinks that's like negative. It was just your clarifying a Brent Venables visit rule in that press conference on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think Brent set a new record for the shortest answer. Right, we've joked about his tendency to ramble long and set new records for his long answers.
He gave you more words than he gave me coming out of was that going into Tennessee? Yeah, he gave you more words because I got 9 words to my Tennessee question, but you did need 2 follow-ups to get over the 9 words.
Yeah. Okay. So my question was on guys who are currently committed taking visits. I don't think the question was like well received. I don't think it like made him mad. I just don't think he wanted to answer it. I don't think he wanted to talk about it because it's become a little bit trendy for Oklahoma commits to jump out and go take a visit somewhere, and he does not like that. So to me, he's starting to sound frustrated. Maybe might be the right word. I'm trying to read body language here, read between the lines, and all that stuff. So it sounds like Brent's a little frustrated by the guys, the number of guys, the increasing number of guys that are going on their some official visits, some mostly unofficial visits. And I think it's starting to bubble over now. That frustration may be bubbling over with Fasusi going to Texas this week, reportedly, to visit, and A&M next week, reportedly, to visit, to watch the renewal of the Texas versus A&M game, which is going to be a phenomenal game. He said, I said, what's about your policy? Is it still? And he said, if you're visiting other schools in the present moment, you're not committed. That's what I would say. And I was like, I thought I set it up nicely for you, so I got to pull that out a little bit more. I said, do guys who do that get their offer pulled? And his response was, is that part of my policy? And I said, I don't know your policy. Can you explain? Is that part of your policy? That's what I'm asking. He says, oh, you're asking. Well, I never said that. Okay. I got one more chance before our man Mike Hop jumps in and cuts me off, right? And I said, has your policy changed? And he said, nope. And that was the end of it. So he does not want to talk about it. It has kind of left a little bit of a raw spot, I think, on him. He put that in place when he got there. He told us, it's in the story. Go check out the column that I wrote yesterday about Johnny Gigolo. Did you propose to your wife? Yes. He was asking our buddy Bob Prisbillo. This was in 2022, March of 22. Did you propose to your wife? Yes. Well, did you then tell her, okay, I'm going to make a reservation to get married on November 30th, but until then, I'm still going to go date these other girls. That's basically what he's talking about. You made a commitment to me. Stop going and looking and dating all these other schools. So he's agitated by this. It's been going on. Ashton Cozart, the wide receiver out of Fort Worth, I think, was the first guy to do it. He went to Oregon, didn't really didn't really appeal to the coaching staff. Here's why I'd like to go to Oregon. He just kind of went on his visit. They pulled the offer. Anthony Evans, wide receiver, was committed. He went to Georgia. I don't know if they pulled the offer, but he immediately flipped to Georgia. Colton Vasek, the defensive end, was committed, went and visited Texas. Again, I don't know if they pulled the offer, but he immediately flipped to Texas. He's a Texas legacy. His parents went to Texas, all that stuff. Dalen Smothers, y'all remember him? Running back from North Carolina, from Charlotte. He asked the coaching staff if he could take a visit to his hometown school of North Carolina State. They said, okay, but don't you go flirting with those guys. Well, he came to Oklahoma, signed with OU, played a year, and then transferred to NC State. Best for everybody. But this year, Ryan, there have been now 5 guys. If Fasusi takes his commitments, there have now been 5 guys. Defensive back Cortland Guillory, committed to OU. Went to visit Texas. He wanted to watch the Texas Georgia game. He's still committed to OU, of course. Cortez Mills, the wide receiver, he went to Nebraska. He wanted to watch the Colorado game. He's still committed. Defensive back Amarian Robinson went to the Arkansas game to watch Texas. He's still committed. Jaden O'Neal last week, the quarterback, 2026 quarterback. Those were all 25s. The 2026 quarterback, Jaden O'Neal, reportedly went to Colorado, wanted to watch the Utah game. He just wanted to watch Shedeur Sanders, is the way it was phrased, and he's still committed to OU. And he has been on social media saying, I'm OU all the way, so on and so forth. So has Fasusi, who's apparently going to Texas and A&M over the next couple of weeks, still committed to OU. And here's the thing, Ryan, I want you to, people are worried about these guys. Coaches are maybe pissed about these guys taking their visits or whatever, going and visiting in his other schools. Out of respect to Brent Venables and out of respect to Oklahoma and out of respect to their commitment, guess what they haven't done during these visits? They haven't promoted it. They haven't put it on social media. Look at me. I'm visiting Arkansas. Look at me. I'm visiting Nebraska. They haven't done that. Go look at their timelines. There have been no promotions of their additional visits. And I think that's out of respect, like I said, to Venables and the process. So good for those guys. You know, you want to go have fun. You're 17 years old. You're 18 years old. You want to go have a good time on campus. You want to go see your friends. You want to go see some other commits. You want to go watch a game. You want to go watch Shedeur Sanders. You want to watch A&M versus Texas. Great. Do it. Have a good time. Go have fun. But don't be out there, you know, from a Brent Venables perspective, don't be out there promoting, hey, look at me, look at my social media. I need some clicks. I need some likes. Do you guys think I'm dressed in a Longhorn uniform? Look at me. I think that has worked out so far. Again, so far, we'll see December 3rd, to where these guys they're just taking trips. They're just enjoying the process. And it sounds like there's not a lot of reason to worry. There is some concern on the part of a lot of people, especially with somebody like Foji, who the offensive line is so bad. Bill Bedenbaugh is on such a hot seat, so to speak. You got this 5-star guy who needs to come in and save Bill Bedenbaugh's job and turn around the offensive line. He's an absolute priority. But I think a lot of this has been overblown by media, recruiting media, fan bases, whatever else, that it's probably not a whole lot to worry about.
Yeah, it seems like, and I don't think we've ever gotten the official clarification on the record of it's not a pull of the offer or any, like that piece there, though it's certainly worked out that way. And it's just kind of been the rolling assumption. You look at the Cortez Mills situation, all that stuff way back when. If going on a visit does not result in the offer being pulled, then I do think this is something that, like, maybe Venables had a very hardline stance on it initially, and while he still would prefer it to work out that way, I don't think it means suddenly if someone takes a visit, they're not going to end up in Oklahoma, because Oklahoma's coaching staff saying, screw this, screw that. Like, I don't think that's how it works. Clearly, that's not how it's going. And if that's the case, then it's great to have that philosophy and that hope and that principle. But in practice, this is working out just like everybody else's visit policy, you know what I mean? And it clearly hasn't hampered Oklahoma from signing 2 pretty talented classes as far as the rankings go, all that stuff, in Venables' first 2 classes. I truly think that who the next OC is, who is going to be the O-line coach, I think that has way more to do with what Vasusi and Foje and those guys end up doing on December 4th officially than if they took a visit or didn't take a visit, whatever the visit policy was. So that's just how I see it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm an idiot. There was one other. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Brent did say back in 2022, after the whole soliloquy about the analogy of proposing to your wife and then going to date other women, he did say he wants to teach. He said, "I'm not going to apologize for having a moral compass. I want to teach our young people what commitment is." And then he said, certainly things can change where maybe there's flaws in that thinking. All right. So we're talking 2022 thinking versus 2024 thinking. Things can absolutely change. Things can, the NIL, for instance, can come and invade your program and make this the only thing that a lot of, not all, but a lot of prospects care about. Hey, coach, what's my NIL situation? Hey, coach, how much can you give me? We've heard some figures on Fasusi. I'm not going to throw the exact figures that I've heard out there, but I'll just say it this. Let's just use simple numbers, round numbers, straight ahead numbers. 1, 2, 3, right? Three, three, three. Uh, Fasusi has been offered a certain number by Oklahoma, and he's being offered a certain number by Texas, and he's being offered a certain number by A&M. Everything that I'm hearing by people who are either inside the program or hang around with people who are inside the program is that OU's number is the 1, and those other schools are offering the 2s and the 3s in terms of 3 times as much, twice as much, that kind of thing. So there's some debate about that. There's some discussion about that, but Oklahoma might need to come back after these 2 visits and discuss, resubmit, whatever you want to say, a new number on Fasusi. If that's how, so that's what I'm saying with Venables. He's like, there may be some flaws in the way I'm thinking here. In March of 2022, we get to December of 2024. That line of thinking might not be applicable to what this kid is thinking today. So yeah, things change.
And we saw that. I don't think Dominic Williams is at Oklahoma if that portal recruitment goes down in the 2022 season. But we've seen NIL obviously
Yep.
big role there. Jeff Levy had a big part of kind of, I don't know if modernizing, but being like, hey, let's get this thing rolling.
Yeah.
This is how you compete in the SEC. And
yeah, and Levy
obviously
was their guy. Remember, Levy was their negotiations guy for a lot of these kids. Levy was the guy that they would say, okay, here, come in. We're going to get you in. We're going to put this number. Talk to Coach Levy. He's our guy. And then he left, and you're like, wait a minute, who's doing our NIL now? So they've restructured the way they do things at Oklahoma a little bit due to that.
And it'll get, in a weird way, it'll actually get simpler as the House settlement gets through. We're going to have plenty of time in the offseason once that's actually finalized to dive into what that is, what that's going to do to college football. There was one kind of like current guy, future, that was asked about Jackson Arnold. Hey, he's still the Oklahoma quarterback for now. He was named a captain. Brent was asked by, I think it was Barry Trammell, who asked him, does him being a captain have anything to do with his future or not? And Brent was kind of like, I mean, not really. Like, we love Jackson, we want to be here, all that stuff. But it was more about his leadership, all that stuff. So if anyone was wondering, what was that, anything like that, it sounds like Brent Venables true to form, this team, leadership, all that stuff. And we talked to Jackson on Monday night. He talked about it being a big thing for him. But it's that is consistent with what we've heard about Jackson Arnold. When he was benched, people were asked about Jackson Arnold. A bunch of guys were like, yeah, he's still the same guy. He's helping Michael Hawkins prepare like he's the starter. He's doing everything he needs to do since he's come back in. He's the same guy. He's still preparing all that stuff. He just needs to hold on to the football. I think that should be like priority number 1 for what happens on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm with you. We'll talk about Alabama here in a minute, but against this particular defense, holding on to the football is going to be very not easy for Jackson Arnold.
Yeah, and that's the task. Come Saturday, the number 7 ranked Crimson Tide playing a lot better here over the last 2 or 3 weeks. A lot of that has to do with what Jalen Milroe and the offense is doing. The last time out, they beat Mercer. Nobody cares. The time before that, they were in Baton Rouge. Omar Bradley, the live Tiger, who was presented as Mike the Tiger, even though he's not Mike the Tiger, still one of the great college football stories. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google Omar Bradley Tiger. It has to come up. He was present, and our guy Omar, what the video board should have said is not Omar's coming. It should have said Jalen's coming, because Milroe ran over, through, around, whatever you want to talk about. He is the engine that's making this thing go. He flattened LSU for 4 rushing touchdowns. He is kind of a holdover from the Saban era, but it'll be different on the sideline, right? It's Kalen DeBoer. It's not Nick Saban walking in. Brent Venables said that it's obviously a different DNA, a different way that they're built, just because they're different guys. But when you look at the offensive line, when you look at the lines of scrimmage, when you look at the quarterback, the skill talent, all that stuff, Brent Venables said, yeah, this still looks like Alabama. Hoover, as you're prepping for this, they certainly look like Alabama to me. I don't know if they're Nick Saban's just death machine that beat everyone to submission for 2 decades, but when you look at them, you go height, weight, stars. That certainly looks like Alabama.
Let's start here, Ryan. I don't know how good Alabama actually could be. The line has moved. I don't know if you saw this today. The betting line has moved from OU as a 14-point underdog to OU as a 13.5-point underdog. I I don't know why that line moved like that so much in the span of what's today, Wednesday, 4
Because Brady
days.
Cook played on Saturday. That's why the line moved. Brady Cook played for
That's it.
Missouri. It's the line. No, okay.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways to pull this game apart. Jalen Milrose certainly. I want to get into him here in just a second. We talked about it a little bit at the top. This game, Ryan, this game has got to be a sellout. This game has got to be a priority for the fans. I've seen on Facebook, for instance, last week, 2 weeks ago. I'm on Facebook a lot posting our content. I don't sit on Facebook scrolling and seeing what everybody's saying. I post our content and I jump off. But you notice last week, as I'm posting, a lot of people putting posts up saying, I'd like to sell my tickets for the main game. What did we see? We saw a crowd of about 50,000 for the main game. I've actually seen some this week, Brian, quite a bit less, but I've actually seen some posts this week of OU fans saying, I'd like to sell my tickets for the Alabama game. What? Listen, I know your team's not very good right now, and I know it hurts you to watch them. I'm a Rams fan. Trust me. I know about that. Don't sell your tickets or sell them to somebody who's definitely going to the game. You know what I mean? This game, we talked about it again at the top, needs to be a sellout. This game is a college football cornerstone. And I just can't picture the mindset that it's 2024. My team's playing in the SEC for the first time ever. Alabama Crimson Tide's coming here as a conference member for the first time ever. I'd like to sell my tickets. I'm blown away by that. This is
I
why
can tell you,
Oklahoma joined the SEC, you guys. This is what you fans have been waiting for since June or July of 2021. Alabama coming to town. I don't get it.
well, they raised season ticket prices, and that's after they're going to endure the first one-win conference season since 1936. So I can understand making a little bit of that back if the Alabama fans want to come in and spray that. That wouldn't be my mindset. I would be there, be square, all that stuff. But
Yeah.
I can't blame anyone. You've been fed an awful product this year. I don't blame if it's just 80,000 Alabama fans. That's what Brent Venables and this program deserve, because that's how they played this year. It's not what the seniors deserve on senior night that are going to be honored, but this team stinks, and I think the fans should. If they rebel in that way by selling the tickets, all that stuff, go for it. Because I mean, here's the thing: when you're 1-5, you don't get to complain, and that's what this team is. It's we've heard abhorrent and abomination used over the last couple of weeks to describe Oklahoma's offense. That's the head coach. That's what Brent Venables has called his own offense. So on that front, yes, but I would like to see Jalen Milroe play. I would like to see Ryan Williams play. Absolutely. Right. And I'm fascinated to kind of see how Kalen DeBoer handles this, because this is when the Saban teams turn that corner. They had their fun in the regular season, and especially in a year like this where they don't have to go to Auburn, it meant that they're not losing these November games. They're rolling into the SEC championship game. They're going to be the big death machine in Atlanta. And the way that Jalen Miller's on the ball, I'm really fascinated, because Oklahoma's rushing defense has been really, really good, John. It's probably been the strength of this entire team. It's what kept them in the Tennessee game and kept that thing a lot closer than it really felt like on the scoreboard. It's what helped them early against Texas be in that game, despite the offense. But the only other really just increasingly just very talented rushing quarterback they played this year has been Lenore Sellers. And because of what the offense did in the first 3 possessions, I think Shane Beamer in South Carolina said the issues that Sellers has had have been fumbles. Let's not run him. There's no need to really do that. That's not going to be the case on Saturday. I am fascinated to see how Oklahoma holds up against a massive, massive offensive line, and what Jalen Milroe has been able to do on the ground with 17 touchdowns on the ground, and he's their leading rusher. What is it, 670 he's got on the ground, basically?
He's got 608 yards rushing, 17 touchdowns. He's averaging 5.1 yards per carry. Dude, this is not just your normal standard dual threat quarterback who throws the football and can run. This is a guy who has the talent and skill and speed and abilities of an elite running back, and you got him back there playing quarterback. He's 6'2", he's 225. He runs a 4.5 easy. He's elusive. He's got the shakes, the juice, whatever you want to call it. 32 total touchdowns so far this year in 10 games, 15 passing, 17 rushing. Get this. That's his rushing stuff. You want him to stand back there and throw? He's averaging 9.4 yards per attempt, 13.95 yards per completion. Those are both second in the SEC. Those are big numbers. The last 2 seasons, guys, his passing touchdowns have averaged 35 yards per completion. When he throws a touchdown, it's usually a deep ball or someone breaking a tackle over the middle. 35 yards per completion. That brings out the bug-eyed emoji for me, right? And then, okay, so you take that away. You do what you can to take away Jalen Milroe. Good luck with that. Their next 3 running backs, pretty average guys. Nothing. There's no Heisman Trophy winners or first-round picks in their running back in their backfield. Their next 3 running backs average 5.4, 5.9, and 5.6 yards per carry. Holy crap. That's obscene. That's getting it done. That's everybody being so scared of Jalen Milroe throwing it deep or keeping the football that they're forgetting that there's other guys that are running the football. And like you said, Ryan, big offensive line. Parker Brailsford is the center. Okay. He's skinny, 6'5", 290 pounds. He could play in the NBA at 6'5", 290. Tyler Booker is the left guard. He's an all-star like Brailsford is. He's 325 pounds. Jaden Roberts is a little guy at 310. He plays right guard. The tackles are Elijah Pritchett at right tackle, 6'6", 327. And of course, we all know Caden Proctor, 6'7", 369 at left tackle. Remember, he was a freshman All-American. He went and tested the waters, transferred to Ohio State for spring football, and then transferred back.
Iowa.
The thing I love about Caden Proctor, Ryan, depending on which side of the fence you fall on with the transfer portal, he's either everything that's right with the transfer portal or he's everything that's wrong with it. And then, of course, they play a lot of 12 personnel. You don't see a ton of 2 tight ends when you're Oklahoma, except now that you're in the SEC, you do. Ole Miss ran 2 tight ends. We saw what happened there. Texas ran 2 tight ends. We saw what happened there. Alabama's tight ends are 262 pounds and 270 pounds. Who's the offensive coordinator again? Joe John Finley? Good luck with that.
Yeah, have fun.
I'm sorry, the offensive coordinator. I'm an idiot. Who's the defensive coordinator at Oklahoma? Zach Alley, right? Good luck with that. Sorry, I had my brain flipped for a second there.
Oh, no, you're good. And on top of that, we haven't even really mentioned the reclassified freshman, Mr. If you've watched the Alabama games, kill everyone.
Yeah.
Ryan Williams. Yeah. Look, Oklahoma, the path to victory defensively special. At least starts with you got to bottle up Milroe. You have to find a way to make him try and beat you from the pocket. That's not a guaranteed path to victory, but you look at the 2 losses, Vanderbilt, Tennessee. First off, Oklahoma could just move to the state of Tennessee. That might help. Secondly, they did a pretty good job of bottling that up and played some ball control to a certain extent. Vanderbilt more than Tennessee. Here's the issue that I'm really worried about for Oklahoma, though, is I know they did a good job with Luther Burden, but Theo Weiss popped free. And I think part of that's just been that Luther Burden's not been 100% healthy this season. He had that situation earlier. Then Billy Bowman, that was a Oklahoma forced Luther Burden to be a non-factor in the second and third quarter because of what Billy Bowman did on that 4th and 1 play. But when it mattered, Theo Weiss and Luther Burden both had big moments there at the end of the game. When it mattered in the second half against Ole Miss, what happened? They brought on the big hefties, and Oklahoma couldn't stay on Watkins or the tight ends. Talk about the chunk plays that they gave up in the second and third quarter through the air against Auburn, one at the very beginning of the 4th quarter. The really, really talented wide receiving core at Tennessee kind of did what they wanted downfield early when they were still airing it out, kind of picked on Kenai Walker. I just don't think this OU secondary at corner specifically is a unit I will label as good. I don't think they're bad. I don't think they're poor. I think they're fine. I really love Eli Bowen. This is not the issue Eli Bowen had against Theo Weiss, where Theo Weiss is just bigger than him with Ryan Williams. But I just think that Ryan Williams is going to be running for long completions behind the Oklahoma defense all night because that's what Oklahoma's done. They've gotten better in pass defense, but they're not a dominant unit there anyway. And so it's almost like a weird for Oklahoma. You want to bottle up Jalen Milroe on the ground. For Alabama, I think that they might want to hit Williams first. And as everyone's so worried about that might soften up what they can do with Jalen Milroe, especially if they can get a lead, run the clock, apply pressure on Oklahoma's offense, which has obviously struggled.
Yeah, Ryan Williams is, like you said, really good at football. He's only averaging 19.2 yards per catch. He's got 8 touchdowns receiving. He's also got 2 touchdowns rushing. Okay. He leads the team in catches and yards. He's spectacular, man. He's the best receiver on arguably the best team in the Southeastern Conference, arguably. So we'll see his impact. I would be worried if I were Billy Bowman and Peyton Bowen and those guys playing safety. I would be worried a little bit about his ability to, and I guess they use him in motion quite a bit. Try to get him one on one. Try to get him lost a little bit. And if you're the safeties, he needs to be your top priority because, like I said, 35 yards per touchdown pass in his 2 years as the starter is what Jalen Milroe has done to other defenses. Yeah, it's going to be a tough cover.
Impressive, impressive. You flip that over. Alabama's defense. There have been some teams that have had success in Alabama's defense this year, maybe more than you become accustomed to if you just think Nick Saban defense. But the one thing that just stands out, they bring a lot of pressure. I mean, you look at what LSU fans yelled about with Brian Kelly for a week of basically him being upset that they're up as big as Alabama was, and they're still bringing 7 and 8 guys on the blitz. I'm really interested to see what that's going to look like. Oklahoma, the offensive line held up a lot better in the first half than they did in the second half against Ole Miss, which I think is the most comparable defensive line as far as some of the talent and skill. This point, I think the offensive line is so much different than when they even played against Tennessee. It's even hard to kind of try and draw through lines between Tennessee all the way here. And to a certain extent, even South Carolina, now that you have a coaching staff that's not trying to run at the strength of the opposing defenses. But it still becomes a really, really tough question of Jackson Arnold, who's been turnover prone, it's been the fumbles, things like that. It's hard to see a path on Saturday, Hoover. He's not under duress, not because like even necessarily the offensive line plays poorly or whatever, but just because Alabama's going to send that much pressure. And Brent Venables talking about it. It's a lot of guys that he's very familiar with, whether through recruiting or a guy like Shiad Campbell at linebacker that he had committed or at one time, all that stuff. It's still the Alabama front seven of old, even if the schemes look a little bit different because of the new coaching staff.
Yeah, let's talk about. I was doing some research over the weekend. Thank you for having an open date so I could do this little bit of research. Spend my off days doing a little bit of research. But I was looking for the 2024 All America team, and I kept coming back to a couple of Alabama defenders. Jahad Campbell, for instance, All American linebacker. Guy's got 85 tackles through 10 games, 10 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. He's got an interception, a fumble recovery, 2 forced fumbles. He's everywhere all at once. He's like Michelle Yeoh in that movie. Everything, everywhere, all at once. He can do it all. Malachi Moore is their safety. Another All-American. How do you have all SEC guys up front, All-Americans at linebacker, All-American candidates at safety? Well, you go to Alabama. That's how. And then their corners are not slouches, but Malachi Moore, get this, Ryan, 56 tackles, 2 interceptions, 1 fumble, 2 forced fumbles. As the safety, okay, I looked this up on Pro Football Focus. As a safety, he plays man-to-man coverage 36% of the time, which isn't one of the like most in the country, but it's a lot for a safety. Billy Bowman, 18%, Peyton Bowen, 16%. His coverage grade in man-to-man coverage, talking Malachi Moore here, number 3 in the country as a man-to-man safety. That's unbelievable. I mean, he's really good. So the thing about them, they've lost a guy by the name of Q Robinson for the season. He got knocked out of the year. He was the best pass rusher. He got knocked out for the year against LSU. He led the team in quarterback hurries. I think he was second with 4 sacks. Now OU, they've still got guys that are going to rush the passer. And of course, OU leads the nation, 41 sacks, last in the country, 41 sacks allowed. Alabama's coming into Norman. Those guys up front are going to, they're going to go in with the idea that they're going to feast on Jackson Arnold or whoever's back there trying to throw the football for the Sooners.
It'll be the good news for Oklahoma is it does sound like they're getting healthier again on offense. This morning on the SEC teleconference, Brent Venables said that they're expecting Gavin Sawchuk to be available. He talked about on Tuesday, Jalil Farouk and Deion Burks, they're obviously kind of on, he didn't say these words, but basically they're on a pitch count. coming back from kind of long-term injuries. Jalil Farouk had talked about that when we talked with him in the postgame at Columbia. Farouk, you would expect to be back up to speed. I don't know on Deion Burks. I'm waiting for this availability report on Wednesday night just because the last we saw of him, he played more than Farouk in the game, but he also got absolutely smoked there right at the end of the game. So we never were able to there was no real update for him after the game. Then you didn't have the availability report last week, and we didn't talk to Brent last week, which I guess we can talk about here for a second. But one of those things where he should be getting healthy at running back. Xavier Robinson is going to keep playing. He said if his team needs him. Brent Venables and DeMarco Murray approached him, said, "What do you want to do here?" And Xavier Robinson said, I would like to play, guys. So Robinson, not worried about the red shirt. Sawchuk coming back in. More Farouk. We'll see on Deion Burks. It's going to be the healthiest this offense has been in a long time, on Saturday.
Well, they're going to need it, especially if Farouk, Brent talked about there being a rust issue, having to knock the rust off. Yeah, they came in during the week of practice and that kind of thing, him and Burks. But another week of practice, another week of being healthy, maybe they can make more contributions. Remember, I made the observation in the press box that why is Farouk out there again? Why? What? Okay, so he's healthy. Why are they not throwing to him again? The same with Burks. Burks, I think, caught 3 passes in the first half, all short little throws, or was targeted 3 times. And then Farouk caught 1. And I'm like, why are those guys here? Why did they even make the trip if you're not going to throw the football to them? So maybe there's a little rust on the part of Jackson Arnold, just and whoever else again in the quarterback room, developing that trust, integrating those guys back into the game plan. Maybe that's part of the issue too.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. For sure. Had 2 weeks to work on it. Something that Jackson talked about on Monday night. And if you missed any of that, go to OklahomaSoonersOnSI.com. Just hit the football tab and scroll down. We've got, it was a smaller group that we talked to on Monday, but we also talked to guys last week on the bye week, or you can just go to Hoover's YouTube page, John Hoover Media. Let's close out the Alabama portion, or the Oklahoma-Alabama portion, with this. It is the last home game of the 2024 regular season, which means it is Senior Day. And this is we're used to calling them very decorated groups for the championships and things that they've won. This group is just a very, very, not an odd group, but they've been through a lot more than most senior classes at Oklahoma has been through. Specifically, certainly Woody Washington, who not only went through the coaching change, but was in Norman pre-COVID and post-COVID. He's the one holdover. Danny Stutzman, who you wrote a great story on Danny, as well as Billy Bowman and Ethan Downs, and Jalil Farouk has the option to go through, but it sounds like that Jalil Farouk wants to come back. At least kind of what we talked about. We'll see what the coaching changes, if that changes anything along the offense. But it's a group that's been through. They came in under a different coaching staff. They were the group that stayed, right, through the coaching change through Lincoln, and then they were the group that stayed again. They chose to stay 2 times. One, to usher in a new era, the Brent Venables era. The other time to usher in a new era, the SEC era at Oklahoma. It's pretty remarkable that they may not have the rings that other OU senior classes has, but I don't know if they've seen college football change and Oklahoma change probably as much as any group that's ever played at this university, which is kind of wild to say that.
It is wild. It's kind of mind-blowing. Now, summer of 2020. Take you back. First of all, y'all please go back and read Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. Go back and read my Danny Stutzman story. Talk to his dad, talk to some people around him, and really shed some light on what Danny was thinking as a freshman after his freshman season when Lincoln Riley left and Alex Grinch left, and his presumption was that Brian Odom was going to leave. And he went to his dad and said, "Well, Dad, looks like I'm going to USC." And his dad's like, whoa, tap the brakes. So really good story of how he, kind of flipped his thinking and, here he is, number 10 now with a chance to be in the top 8 in school history in total career tackles. So big time on Danny Stutzman, but it was 2020, summer of 2020. Y'all remember everybody's wearing them damn masks, right? Everybody had the fear of COVID and was getting shots and all that stuff. Caleb Williams, love him or hate him, Caleb Williams and his dad, love him or hate him, organized that Sooner Summit, which was a deal where they all gathered at the Embassy Suites Hotel. They're hanging out, getting to know each other a little bit. This is the 2021 freshman class, and this was the summer of 2020. So they were getting to know each other, and they went out and they hung out. And we got some video of them and did some interviews talking to them. And I got some one-on-ones with the freshman class that year. They were still high school seniors, of course, that year. But it was just, think about that, where Sooner Summit, a couple dozen, it was like 23 players, came to Oklahoma on their own dime, paid their own travel. Recruiting was all shut down. There were no visits going on. There were no official visits or unofficial visits, no campus activities of any kind. Everything was shut down, which is mind-blowing still when you think about it. Look back on that era. And these kids all came, and their families came to Oklahoma City, came to Norman, again, paid for it themselves, and did interviews and met the coaching staff and practiced social distancing and wore their masks. I mean, and here we are in 2024, and their careers are coming to an end. How many guys are on that roster still, Ryan? How many? Can you count them?
Is it just the Woody and these crew here?
Yeah, and
It's
Woody was in the Woody. Remember, was on the 2019 class, so he was already on the team. But he's one of the seniors that's still there. But of that class, I think there's 4 total guys: Stutzman, Bowman, Ethan Downs, and Jalil Farouk. And that's crazy. They sent they signed 15 guys that year, freshman class, including Caleb Williams. And of the 15, there's only 4 left. 11 dudes, for one reason or another, packed their bags and went somewhere else. So, like you said, this class has seen more change in college football. With there being scholarship offers and never having met the coach, with guys committing to schools and never having met the coaching staff or the coach they're going to play for, with guys signing and enrolling and never having personally one-on-one shook hands with their future coaching staff, their head coach. Unbelievable. So here they are. These guys are wrapping it up 2024. They're finishing their careers. And those were the freshmen that were coming in, the high schoolers who didn't get recruited properly in 2020. And like you said, Lincoln Riley left. Brent Venables came in, fired his defensive coordinator, fired his offensive coordinator. And here they are getting ready to play their last home game. So if anything else, if you call yourself an OU supporter, go watch these guys at home one more time.
We've got the big Stutzman story. That's OklahomaSoonersOnSide.com. Thursday, I'll have the story on, it's not the others, but it's everybody else and what this group means to the team. And there's a lot. Xavier Robinson, I thought, had just great perspective for a freshman, basically talking about how he remembers when he was like a sophomore in high school, how much he wanted to win that last home game for his seniors, knowing a lot of these guys into their football career, stuff like that. Now, obviously, these guys have, at least this core has careers on beyond past this, but it's the last time they'll be out there at Oklahoma. I remember sitting in those press conferences talking about on that signing day with Lincoln and crew, the virtual visits and what they're basically a Zoom call where they were trying to program videos and stuff so you can see the facilities. All that was this class that's about ready to graduate. It's going to be kind of a weird moving on as we get done with super seniors. Those will be a thing of the past, all that stuff. So that will all wrap up Saturday night with the senior day festivities. We will be there. We will also talk to you guys, obviously, whatever happens in Norman with our post-game podcast, certified fresh from the press box, however many hours after the game we want, because we get to work in Oklahoma. Thank you, Mike Houck. Thank you. There's some other stuff going on, though, who both basketball teams are up and running. Last night, Ginny Baranchek, her crew, went on their first road trip of the year. They went up to Wichita State, a 79-49 game that at face value, you go, wow, they rolled. And they did. Ginny Baranchek, I'm about to talk to her here in a couple minutes. They had 24 turnovers and shot 50% from the free throw line. It's about as mad as I've seen a head coach in the midst of a 30-point win, as Ginny's just light. I think she lit into the refs trying to get a flagrant almost because she was like so mad at her team for some of the stuff. Now, they still forced 21 turnovers. They went on a 15-0 run predicated by the defense in the first half, a 13-0 run in the second half. They held Wichita State to just 15 second half points total. Like the defense is swarming, but just kind of funny that's how it panned out. Then the men, You go back to Saturday, they knocked off Stetson 85-64. There've been a couple of moments in a few of these games where in that Northwestern State game, the Stetson game, without Bryson Goodine, they kind of had to shift what they want to be on the fly. Goodine and Jadon Jones both hit 77 threes each at their respective spots last year. Those are the two guys that Porter Moser's kind of relying on to be that three-point threat. Both those guys out right now. Jones with the back, Goodine with the ankle. So they'll be back in action tomorrow against East Texas A&M. Ryan, who's East Texas A&M? That's Texas A&M Commerce. They just decided to change their name like 3 weeks ago because I guess you can do that. So that's the situation there for the men and the women. The men, this East Texas A&M game is the last one before they head to the battle for Atlantis. They'll take on Providence next Wednesday, then either Davidson or Arizona, and then either Gonzaga, Indiana, Louisville, or West Virginia. Still a bunch of that to play out. The women, they're headed to Vegas. They've got UNLV. Then they got a day or two off. Then they've got, I believe it's DePaul, and then either Kansas State or some other team. And I didn't have the schedule out in front of me because I'm too scatterbrained. But here's the thing you need to know about the women. They're going to be in Vegas from Friday to Wednesday. It's basically like Thursday to Wednesday, all while the Formula One race is going to be there. So just keep the Sooner women in your thoughts and prayers because that's going to be an absolute zoo out there in Vegas.
That sounds fun. Let's go. Let's go to Vegas.
It does.
Well, let's wait. But we'll get there eventually.
I've got bad news for you. It's going to be as expensive as can be. The great Ryan Aber was stranded in Utah, held hostage in Utah one extra day last year because the Las Vegas Grand Prix was happening that weekend and the airport was so busy. They just said, I don't care if you have a scheduled flight or not. We're not taking any more planes. So that's the Vegas experience. But all of our continued coverage of everything OU Bama, all the hoops, all that stuff, the softball features will continue to trickle out there as we have finally got those up and running once we have Nuclear Media Day. All that stuff can be found at the one easy spot. You know it, you love it. Just bookmark it. Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. And as always, for all the video stuff, you can head to Hoover's YouTube page, John Hoover Media. John, have I left anything out?
I don't know.
Probably not.
It's
whatever.
Crazy. We regret not being able to bring you the standard midweek 3-segment show because we got stood up we got big timed by the Alabama guys. The Alabama SI site kind of big timed us. That's okay. You can have us on your show next year and we'll big time you.
Well, you can't have me. I'm tired. I'm going to see Gladiator on Friday. I haven't told Hoover this, by the way. I'm basically booking. I didn't know I could do this, but I booked a 2:30 IMAX to see Gladiator 2 on Friday. So nothing's allowed to blow up. Once Thursday happens, all the news must be set in stone. So I'm going to see Gladiator. That is my Super Bowl this week because Oklahoma has not delivered on the hype of OU and Alabama.
Yeah. I'll have my radar on while you're at the movie theater. So we should be okay.
We gotta. I just know if anything breaks, you're just gonna know that I'm out of the movie. Because I'm just gonna all caps. Are you not entertained by all this news that I missed? Because I'm doing a Gladiator too. That's the big news. But we've rambled for too long. Like I said, here on the pod. Next time we'll talk to you Saturday night, Sunday morning, somewhere in there, because it'll be late after the Sooners and the Crimson Tide wrap it up. And as is tradition, after this game, whoever loses is not allowed to use Crimson anymore. That's them's the rules. So they'll figure all that out. We'll break it down. We'll talk to you guys Sunday morning. Is probably the best way. It'll be like 2 a.m. It'll be great to recap everything Oklahoma and Alabama. For John Hoover, I'm Ryan Chapman. We appreciate you guys. We'll talk to you on the post-game edition of the Sooners on SI Pod this weekend.